aby sme mohli spoločne pokračovať. Dúfam, že obednejšia prestávka vám padla vhod a že ste stretli starých známych, s ktorými ste mohli obnoviť kontakt a zároveň ste spoznali určite aj množstvo nových ľudí, s ktorými ste mohli ten nový kontakt nadviazať. Takže poďme pokračovať našim ďalším popoludnejším programom. Ja vás poprosím o pozornosť. Chcem vám predstaviť a zároveň privítať pani Viktóriu Helenbart, ktorá je podpredsedničkou Slovenskej advokátskej komory. Vítajte, pani doktorka, a sme radi, že sa zúčastňujete našej konferencie v zastúpení advokátov Slovenskej republiky. Veľmi nás to teší. A ten záujem advokátov my naozaj chceme aj ďalej podporovať vzájomnými širšími kontaktmi, ktoré pôjdu viacej do hĺbky. Pokračujeme v našom odbornom programe. A chcela by som pozvať pána Joepa Zandera z Holandska, ktorý je členom spoločnosti PASG, to je Parental Alienation Syndrome Group, ktorý nám svoj príspevok predniesie na tému rodičovské odcudzenie ako sociálno-politická choroba. Porovnanie odcudzenia manipuláciou na mikro, mezo a makro úrovni. Pán Zander, tešíme sa, nech sa páči.
Okay. Thank you to be my audience today. Thank you to your committee for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity to do the speech here in Bratislava. I brought some books for you, for the committee, so to remember me. I've written out my speech. It's the first time, for me it's the first time that I give a speech not in my native language. So I've written it all out, but I try to get loose a bit from the paper, so I might be some mistakes or sometimes stumble, but ask your compassion for that. I introduce myself, I start to introduce myself. My first title of my speech is Towards a Multi-Level Understanding of the Manipulations Involved in Child-Parent Estrangement. I'd like to introduce myself a bit. I'm a pedagogue. That means I work with children and have academic education for that. But besides that, I'm an artist. You can see it in my introductory picture. I wrote several books on the subject of PAS and on missing fatherhood. You see one of the books there. This is one of the paintings I made. This painting is also used in the Dutch Senate when there was a change in law concerning keeping the joint custody. It was in 1998. So they hold it up in the Senate. This was my painting, was used as an action card. I say the right English word, I hope. The parental alienation syndrome was I tell you something about Holland as well, about the Netherlands. Parental alienation syndrome was introduced in the Netherlands in 1999 with my first book and a speech of Gardner in Breda, or city of Breda in Holland. So it's already a long time there, and it has some existence in law, in jurisprudence. And it has some existence. It might be my Ross period, Picasso period. But well, we go on with this. It's a pity. You see a lot of pictures are made, paintings, in these presentations, and they all look another color. Perhaps it will change somewhere between. I hope so. So we have had this. What I was telling you, the last thing I was telling you was I'm a father too, of a daughter and of a son. So the next one, I prepared something about parental alienation in basics, but as you have heard enough about that from earlier speakers. What you see here is a drawing. And what I will indicate with this drawing is that often you see pictures like this, and it looks like both parents have a quarrel and they're both guilty about that. But if you look better, you see it's one parent that struggles with the child in her hands against the other parent, and that's about what rests from the other parent, mostly the father. He is down just one finger high. He still exists a little bit, and the child, well, you see what it looks like. I'm going to read on here. In the speech, I will give an insight in the connections between different levels of manipulation practices that contribute to the pathogeny of PAS. How cognitive dissonance influences the recognition of manipulation practices, and so curation often overrules prevention. Parental alienation syndrome, prevention or curation of loyalty abuse. For defining PAS, I mostly refer to the definition of Gardner. I'm not going to repeat it, but there's also a definition of Mr. Burnett, and there's a difference between them. The definitions of PAD, parental alienation disorder, that's the way it's brought into the DSM and the other international manuals on psychiatry, is that PED contains a wider vision on the pathogenesis of PAS. So it's less necessary to designate the cause to just one parent. It's more the appearance in the child that counts for diagnosis. So in that way, it gives more room to say more about the social environment as well abusing the child, not only the parent. So that's my main subject for today. When we were translating the word parental alienation in Dutch, there was something special because there's not an easy translation for that, and most people thought we should translate it into the word vervreemding. But when you translate that back, you get the word estrangement, and that's a more passive word than alienation is meant to be. Indeed, that's something that one deliberately can practice. It is even embodied in the active behavior of the infected child. Therefore, I'm not happy with some schools of thought that emphasize PAS as out of the disease of the programming parent only. Well, that might be clear from the title of my speech today, but I will explain it further on more thoroughly. I will also introduce to you the word loyalty abuse as being the crime committed in programming a child, because it's a crime. I don't have to repeat that, what Stu said about it. It's a kind of crime when you violate a child, mentally violate a child. For the Dutch language, loyaliteitsmisbruik was a quite new word which was introduced in my first publications. This word, however, has a broader meaning as it takes place in the various social domains, for instance, organizations. One of the tragedies with the discourse around PES is that it distracts from taking the problem's responsibility of the surrounding people and especially the professionals. It leads to accentuate the individual contribution of parents and children on the problem instead of overlooking the bigger picture. Proposing and presenting PES to DSM-5, PES leads to societal recognition of PES, but also put more accent on the psychiatric issues of children in the early and adult years. It accentuated the personal contribution of parents who are often suspected to have a psychiatric problem, like borderline or narcissistic symptoms. So PES curation this way might become a promotion of psychiatry instead of individuals change. So prevention is often connected to recognition of structural elements in the appearance of diseases. Yeah, you understand what I mean? So if you see it as a personal problem, a curation problem, you have not so too much attention for the prevention of it, because you assign to the problem of the child and the parent involved, and not on the systematical thing. The focus is often on curation instead of prevention. The reason being is that curation earns more money. I don't know how it's in other countries, but in Holland it's a billion booming business, the divorce business, and it's always growing bigger and bigger. Even in our own circles of PS professionals, we meet care professionals with a negative attitude towards parents. Sometimes even good-willing professionals deny or ignore the healthy contributions companions can provide. We as parents have to regain the power of making our own parental decisions. Be taken seriously, so will promote the responsibility of parents and also a critical reflection on the duties and responsibilities of professionals and juridical institutions. I made some progress in what will be the best prevention for all this. One of the things is having equal parenting, but one thing else is necessary, that parents are aware of what they're doing when they are gonna plan children in their life. So what I advocate is that parents make early decisions, make early arrangements about their children, and even look forward what might happen if they are divorcing. So they can overlook the situation in which it's a pity, but it's quite normal in Western countries to divorce, and you have to know what you do then as parents with your children. So what I propose is parents make early decisions, and those decisions have some validity in course as well. What I did myself before bringing up my second child is even make a kind of ritual of that. So organizing your friends, organizing your family around this situation of a child. And so the arrangements are a bit embodied in a kind of ritual. You can make a kind of, what do you call it, a party from it, you know. And then you can ask your friends and your family even to to function like a kind of arbitrary judgment committee, you know, a kind of judgment for yourself, for your own social environment, in case there will be some problems after all. Okay, I go on reading out. Past theorists like Godard and Bonno Baker developed models in which they describe which manipulations were found in a sample. That was Donald and Baker, and in a single case, Godard, it's a French scholar. I want to show how Godard depicts the manipulation mechanisms. That's in here in the scheme. Oh, yeah, we have a white screen now. That's great. This is the way Godard depicts it, and she made a scheme in which she makes a division of diverse manipulations that are used by manipulating parents against the rejected parent. She divides the 4: sacrosanctity, group cohesion, propaganda, and negative messages, and all subdivided in all kinds of manipulations like lying, pseudo-neutrality, espionage, reactions, exaggerations. In total, with leading to revisionism of history and justification of the behavior of the programming parent. Well, all this is seen in a micro-environment of the single family. Although there is a lot of knowledge about the way parents, especially fathers and alienated children, are treated by modern society, there is not much systematic listing of that. I already did describe a lot of those phenomena in my book Missing Fatherhood and a series of articles. Other authors did as well. The first thing was to put those phenomena on a list and put them in a kind of causal model. Oh, I already got that. So what you see here is a model in which you can make a division between the microstructure, where it happens between mother, father, and child, and the microstructure here on the outside, and the institutions between. So there's a lot of influence on this micro situation of the parents and the child. And all this, like, it's divided between institutes, politics, history, and ideology. All those things influence, all those micro things, political things influence the core of the family. So it's not only what happens there that will cause problems when there are problems, it's the whole system. After I've done that, I made a new list of manipulations as described by Donald and Baker and Godard, and added some other manipulations known from more general literature or recognized by myself. I connected those lists and developed a matrix of manipulation practices at micro, meso, and macro level. I defined the micro level as the level of family, household, close friends, and neighbors. The meso level contains the institutions and the people in those institutions. The macro level is that of state, politics, and media, as well containing all the aspects of the discourse on related subjects. So you get, for example, the list is longer, you get this. So we have, what we just saw was the strategies Godard described, the manipulation strategies which are used in parental alienation. I compared them with the way Baker and Donald did describe them, and I got some examples, but not only examples on the micro level, but as well on the meso and macro level. So I'll read out further about that. For example, derogatory, denigrating behavior towards civilians, looking at parents as second-choice educators that need to be trained themselves, is the standard way of looking at school, court and politics. It even gets worse when it comes to fathers. This kind of treatment is totally comparable with the manipulation of bad-mouthing or spreading negative messages, as Godard describes. So that's a thing what not only happens on micro level, but as well on the other levels. Another mechanism is the fait accompli tactic, which is the opposite of the Solomon's verdict based on the biblical story of King Solomon. It's still remaining one of the major instruments of power. Be the first to grasp the children and move away from the other parent. That too is comparable with the way the judicial just takes over the competencies of the legislative powers. That's a bit difficult, but I'll get to that later. Isolation is as well one of the manipulations. Everyone who dealt with this as an individual knows that one is isolated from companions by the secrecy of separated processes. Everyone gets his or her own secret procedure. Isolation is a manipulation practice that is experienced on children in alienation situations. I must say I was surprised that in Slovakia all family processes are public. So that's a bit of difference. In Holland and a lot of other European countries, it's all secret. Even the pronouncements are secret. So we can find micro and meso parallels for every manipulation in the mentioned models of Godard and Baker and Donald. It's not just that those institutions strengthen and condition the manipulative behavior of parents, but institutions and their workers are often simply the bad example. All mechanisms, manipulations that occur in the programming of PAS manifest in a clear and grand way on meso and macro level in the interaction of judges, youth workers, politicians, media, schools with parents. They are not only appearing independently in the level, but also shape manipulations in other levels. So it can be stated that PAS manipulations are ingrained in the smallest unit of analysis, the parent-child, as well as at an institutional level. In other words, PAS manipulations are the recurrent social practices pertaining to a social system and following a structuration logic. Next to each other, they also interfere. So that's what you see here in this scheme. So it's not only that in micro level, parental alienation is programmed. It's also done from meso level and macro level, but as well, between those levels, there is an interaction which finally causes the programming of the child. The child, I will read out. Meso and macro levels are interfering with the micro level in different ways. The first way of interfering is the way a good example is given. This sometimes directly influences the child, but more often the family or broken family system. Well, in fact, it's often a kind of hierarchy that occurs. The judiciary gives a bad example, in fact saying, for example, that to a school dividing parenthood in a status-holding parent, too nicely called the caring parent, because I call a programming parent the caring parent, and the loser often called the non-caring parent, who has to pay for them instead of applying equal parenting as required by the law. That's what they should do, the judges. What happens is that the school, so I moved from micro to meso, is refusing information despite of a Dutch law and a law in a lot of other countries that already since 1995 gives both parents the same rights in the context with the school. So this exemplary behavior is just what the programming parent needs to keep on or start integrating and alienating the other parent. This is what other parents at the school experience. This is even creating a school parent group behavior that really excludes the alienated parent out of society. What I noted as well is that schools no longer refer to their rules, but to the general fixed idea of the best interest of the child, like judges do and the whole of the society does, but only often to mask their own interests. So the interest of the child is not the interest of the child, it's just a word using the interest of others. The second way those levels interfere is by ruling. As said, well, it's simply, if you have a rule, it works from upside to down. I'll leave this short. The third way they interfere is by loyalty, and that's quite important for a parental alienation. We are used to do what we are expected to do by the authorities or institutions on which we depend. It's assumed that we live in a free society with freedom of speech, freedom of expression. It's intriguing that it sometimes looks a bit like that, but an important thing which keeps me from acting as a free civilian is when I have to make a decision to choose between the arguments and visions I have on the one side and the loyalty to my environment on the other side. So what keeps me from telling something about the insights I have on the judicial system in Holland, on the scientific system in Holland, the way scientists are bought, are paid by the government to tell not the truth, makes me feel unsure about what to do with it, because it's creating a big cognitive distance. Oh, sorry, I have to use the microphone now. It's creating a big cognitive distance between me and the people around me. My ties with this society demands often that I limit my expressions because they are understood, because they aren't so not understood that I risk social isolation. My expressions are not being understood because they comply with the mainstream logic or mental schemes. For instance, my closest friends look at the official state television news that is indirectly controlled by the state. Well, I'm not living in a communist country, but it is like that. News that is indirectly controlled by the state and funded in the Netherlands by taxpayers, but also links to the institutionalized loyalty connections connected to the state. This means that it's through repetition and confirmation that logics are maintained, and thus also why the existence of PES is so ignored in itself. So I get back to that, the core thing, that's PES. PES is so ignored because people don't want to see the problem. The problem is so huge, is so big, that they are not able to understand that it can exist in a free society. So, long before we feel that direct repression, we experience a feeling of cognitive tension. We start hearing and believing selective. The fear of losing your children makes you cringe. The fear of losing your home in the divorce battle, losing your friends who can't even believe this all exists. It makes you behave submissively. Well, that's what happens in family law business. We shouldn't look away from the mechanisms. The children are the final victim, and the actors above them in the pyramid are the final oppressors. addressing PAS is also addressing cognitive distance. Also, take some time for this picture. Someone seeing what it might imagine? Yes? Someone said?
Cognitive distance.
Distance?
Cognitive distance.
Yeah, that's what you see. Okay. Well, in this case, it imagines the Don Quixote and Sancho Panza fighting the windmills. And that's a bit what you feel when you have to deal with cognitive distance. The mechanisms I describe fit into the theories on cognitive dissonance. A special branch in that theory is from the Dutch scientist Bart Notenboom. He introduces the term cognitive distance into Vestinger's basic theory. I interpreted Notenboom's theory on my turn in the way that if there's an optimum distance in which people feel possibilities to communicate and get new ideas, and there is an optimum, as Notenboom states. Well, this is the figure Notenboom made from it, and I filled in a bit. So, when you have different cognitive situations, when you have someone who has totally other ideas or total other perceptions of the situation, that sometimes gives you a reason to discuss and to get to another point of view. But if what you see here, this is how much you are learning, this is how much cognitive distance there may be between you and another or an ID. If this cognitive distance is huge enough, and then this learning curve shows the possibilities by a certain absorptive capacity. Absorptive capacity will, I mean with that, is that, for instance, a scholar has a higher adaptive absorptive capacity than perhaps someone on the street. So with a high absorptive capacity, this is the learning line, and it ends here. So there are things behind that line that cannot be communicated, and they still exist. They look like fake news or fake science, but it's often the other side around. Let me give you a practical example of a kind of experiment. It's about the judiciary. I must say it's about the Dutch judiciary. To let you feel something about what I told you. In case, just in case, I'd like to tell you that the Dutch judiciary, together with the Department of Justice and Security, behaves a bit like a criminal organization. Try to imagine this claim. So, perhaps first recognize what's your first thought on that. And secondary, your impulse on that. What to do. And try to label that in your head. So now that's difficult to stay honest, but there are some possible reactions from you. I'm going to categorize the following. Perhaps you think, Joep is talking nonsense. Dutch criminal system, Dutch justice system can't be criminal. That's not possible at all. Or you think, there might be some truth in it, but he's exaggerating. And there might be a possibility that you think, perhaps, he might be right. A lot of people in the third category, perhaps he's right. Yes, raise your hands. Not so much. Doesn't matter. I know that. Well, the problem for me, myself, is that I have a strong feeling of cognitive tension on this point as well. I have the feeling I shouldn't tell this kind of inconvenient truth. I have the feeling that I'm embarrassing people and give you an unpleasant feeling, and myself too. So I'm not making that conclusion. I just give you some facts about what's happening in my home country, which is seen as a very neat and example-giving country. I already said that as far as we can unravel it, public sentences in family law in the Netherlands are undersigned under the sentence pronounced publicly. That's said, that's written. An organization called the General Secretary of Judiciary attracts itself hierarchical powers without any legal status. This organization firmly limited the constitutionally obligated public pronouncement of sentences. No sentence on family law in the Netherlands, as far as known, is physically pronounced in an open session of a court, which on itself is not necessary. About 2% of the sentences are being published. There's no public pronouncement of about 98% of the sentences. This is already practiced this way during several decades, and the number of sentences involved are millions. All those sentences, I go on. There was an evident just decision of the Court of Arnhem in 1997 to give insights to sentences that was overruled by the aforementioned secretary. Apart from the question what title anyone could have to interfere in the autonomy of the judges and the responsibility of courts to facilitate those judges, even the status of this organ on that moment was quite obscure and sinister. It's still on family law, I have to say that. Considering the checks and balances of the trias politica, it seems quite obvious that it's precisely a task of the civilians to execute some control on the judiciary, as well on the family law judiciary. So there's a power structure, compared with the all-mindedness in Godard's regime, assigned to the judiciary institutions without any democratic control. All those non-public pronounced sentences are undersigned as being public pronounced. Members of parliament are feared to intervene. Moreover, some members of parliament are judges themselves in Holland. Considering the checks and balances of the trias politica, it seems quite obvious that it's precisely a task of the civil. Oh, I already said that, sorry. There is a general knowledge of a fear culture on the Dutch Department of Justice that is so deep that civil servants even don't want to speak about this culture of fear, so says the work council of this department. Public and open discussions about these kinds of problems is impossible and encounters fear, even angst. And well, people just don't want to know. So, gets to these sentences are made. If butchers are not inspected, not checked by the inspection service, this is at the expense of meat quality. So the case law too needs external control to deliver quality justice. This control, which in accordance with the principles of trias politicas can only be conducted by citizens, is now made impossible by the lack of statutory disclosure. Laws on the rights to visitation, joint custody and eco-parenting that exist in Holland, that all exist, are not executed by the judiciary without citizens being able to perceive that well. Moreover, by virtue of the judiciary systematically under almost all family pronouncements lies a lie which conceals the non-transparency itself. As a result, the most vulnerable citizens, children in the crush, are damaged, just like public health is damaged by spoiled meat in the case of the butchers. The experience of a past PAS child in the period of his, her or her programming as well afterward can also be understood as a problem of cognitive distance. So the recognition of PAS often experienced as a counterintuitive and therefore bearing aspects of cognitive distance. So the cognitive distance for a child is that a child can't imagine he has a good other parent, a good father, who cares and loves him. That's a cognition which is unreachable for a long time for the PAS child. This painting is called Inquisition. Researching PAS and the limits of objectivity. I took some time of my spare minutes to explain this part because I really think that this sacrosanctity and fear culture spreads top down. It's difficult to unravel those mechanisms from interviews and case studies, although I tried so. I did a lot of interviews for my PhD research with adult children who freed themselves of the frames of alienation and restored their relation with the once rejected parent. They often can describe their experiences in terms that match those of Godard and Baker-Danal, but seldom on meso or macro level. I also made a lot of interviews for my book Missing Fatherhood with fathers who were often able to address meso mechanisms, but quite seldom manifestations that we can connect with those mechanisms. But I must say, I feel a bit pity not being able to do this without clear case material that addresses effects of two causes. One important mechanism of manipulation is hiding and lying. Godard sees it also as a kind of false reconstruction of history. Lying is in the Netherlands standard in family law. There's no fact-finding in practice. The mantra is that truth-finding is not of any interest. This mantra was officially announced as a standard in September 1995 by the Department of Justice, and in 2014 was replaced by a law in which truth-finding is an obligation. But hiding history and truth is still common practice, and thus a driver of manipulation practices. In every sentence, judges falsely state that a sentence is publicly announced. And this lack of transparency is a bad example as well for others, for the people involved. It's recognized that alienated children lose memory, are not able to distinguish between reality and delusion, and get so far that it grows to an important phenomenon of psychiatric disease. A lot of therapeutic institutions are totally false in missing the punchline. Even parents' organizations reproduce a miserable way of writing history. So what I say, when history is an important thing, when truth is an important thing for children to have, to see what is truth, to make, to separate truth from delusion. We should do the same in society. and see and have a look at what really happens. I wouldn't be able to really understand the mechanisms had I not been going through a process of 25 years of deep involvement into this matter. So I am a part of this history, which one will urge us to forget. I'm a survivor, in the words of Joep. For instance, I've got this one. There it is. For instance, I found that there were things like forms of courts that pre-sentenced. Look at this. Pre-sentenced is a court form, yeah? It's saying, in Dutch, decision in 14 days. Custody, the mother. You see, secondary custody, that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. The father. You see, this is pre-printed. You see, this was added to it in this case. It was a case in which I was kind of lawyer. I represented the father, and that's why I got this form at all. If there had been a lawyer having this form from a court, he would not have told it to other people, because it was really dangerous to bring that out. But it really exists in Holland. And not only in Holland, it exists in Belgium as well. I found the same kind of things there. So I'm going to the conclusion. Loyalty abuse in parental alienation can be considered. I'll give the conclusion here. So this was about discrimination of fathers, of course, that's often the fact. Concluding, loyalty abuse and parental alienation can be considered as a manifestation and the result of a broader existence of loyalty of civilians facing the powers that be. Loyalty abuse is one of the major mechanisms of power. Parental alienation is the excessive form of abuse of power, finally organized in the behavior of a so-called rule of law. This abuse is manifested and persisted through manipulation practices at various levels, as I showed you. The child is urged to know about the reality of alienation on every level, and we are also urged to know if we are not aware enough about this situation. Thank you.
Ďakujem pekne doktorovi Joepovi Zanderovi za jeho príspevok a ak máte otázky na speakera, nech sa páči, pýtajte sa.
Oh yeah, that's questions.
Nepočujú tlmočníci.
Ďakujeme pekne za ochotu, ale pokiaľ vás počujeme, my nepočujú vás tlmočníci, aby mohli preložiť, tak poprosím vás do mikrofónu. Ďakujem.
Yes.
Dobrý deň.
Prepáčte,
že tu tak pobehujem, len chceli fotky, tak sa ospravedlňujem. Chcel som sa spýtať, keď ste vravili, že o tých krajinách dvoch, ktorých to sledujete, tak mi napadlo, že existuje na svete krajina, alebo viete o takej, kde toto nie je, alebo kde je to v najmenšej miere táto nespravodlivosť, táto diskriminácia tých otcov, kde by sme možno mohli sa ich spýtať, prečo ako to robia? Viete niektorí o takej krajine, kde to je inak? Island, tam som bola, no tam je malo ľudí.
No. I'm afraid to say, well, there are different kinds of sorry?
Islamic countries.
Yeah, okay. I'll get into that. I had it in mind. I give an answer myself, yeah? So discrimination of fathers is not an easy subject, you know, because I think women have been discriminated for centuries. Women have been discriminated for centuries. I forgot to make a microphone. And so often it's thought that the discrimination of fathers that can't exist because that are men and the women are discriminated, so the man can't be discriminated. But it's a really difficult situation, and I think men as being fathers are discriminated. That's true. Sometimes even in other subjects, but that's not the subject of this afternoon. I think it's worldwide, but the way the suppression of fathers works is in the Western countries is very different from other countries. And in the Western country, it's being very apparent. The discrimination comes up with these forms I've shown to you. In other countries, often they have other roles. The men have other roles, very traditional roles, and they are important for children as well. But the division of labor, the division of labor at home, labor, external labor, is others than in the Western countries. And the Western countries make this kind of discrimination visible. So when you want to have a relation with your child, you have to be something special to get it arranged, an autonomous relation with your child. When I start bringing a child, it was not normal to ride with your child in a, how you call it, child...
Stroller.
Yeah. What's it?
Stroller?
Stroller? Okay, stroller. I didn't know. So I was really looked at what's that man doing, and that's changed. In a lot of Western countries that changed. But I myself think, well, okay, men have something that is still going on, caring and bringing up children, even when they're discriminated this hard way that they are discriminated in the Western countries. You understand what I mean? Is that about the answer? So I think it's worldwide, father's discrimination, but the appearance is different. Yes, but I was, oh yeah. Is it okay? Is it an answer? Okay. Next question, perhaps? Oh yeah, the Nordic countries. You said something about the Nordic countries. Yeah, okay. That's the thing about parental equality is very important, as my colleague there pointed at this morning. And it's developing, but it's very slowly developing. And it might be, I'm not so an expert as my Italian colleague, it might be that in some Nordic countries it's better. Well, I will assume when he says so. And that's giving some hope, I must say. But what I see in Holland, we have a law on equal parenting. We have that law. I myself wrote a text for that law into the Dutch parliament. But it's not practice. It's not practice. It's just the law, and the judges are not interested in doing that. And what they really do is that they keep the fighting going on. Because when you have a law on equal parenting and you're not practicing it as a judge, you're not saying both parents should divide equal or something like that, the care, when you're not saying that, you create fight. Because, well, all those fathers say, well, we have that right for equal parenting. I'm not going home, I'm going on to the judge, to the European Parliament, they say often. So, what you have with such a thing, a theoretical equal parenting and a practicing the opposite, is that you create a lot of struggle. And that's really scary, because that's already for decades. And that's why I pointed so much at the judiciary, and the failing of the judiciary in Holland, at least, and a lot of other countries. Because we have the laws, as people or legislators in the parliament made laws for behaving in family law procedures. And the laws are just not done. It's not what the judges do. They decide in every case. You don't by chance, you know. One time that way, the other time that way. You don't know. You can go on. Perhaps sometimes far away you get your rights as a parent. So that keeps on the fighting. We shouldn't do that. Equal parenting should be really the base, and absolutely the base. Parents should make an arrangement on that. We know how to behave. We know how the judges should behave. Okay, so I hope the northern countries will give a good example. Okay, I've said enough, I think. Sorry.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne. Pán Joep Zander, člen Parental Alienation Study Group, priniesol takisto zaujímavé pohľady a možno až provokujúce niektoré také vyzývavé názory alebo jednoznačne formulované stanoviská, ktoré určite pomôžu rozhýbať aj diskuziu medzi vami, odborníkmi, a rozhodne prispejú k tomu, aby tie rôzne názory na povedzme striedavú starostlivosť a súvisiace témy boli nerovnaké, ale naozaj viedli ku otvorenej diskuzii. Pokračujeme ďalej a trošičku možno v inej forme, zmenenej forme.